This is an RNZ podcast.
Never having a night off, or a day for that matter, is Colin Peacock, who joins us now with our Midweek Mediawatch. Good evening, Colin. Welcome along.
Oh, you start of a 3-night run?
Start of a 3-night run, yes. I'm back.
I'll be listening.
Like Jimmy Kimmel.
I'll be listening. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Making slightly fewer headlines than Kimmel, but
Yeah, somewhat.
people have noticed.
Yeah. Well, you might have. But it is, speaking of such, did you see his return today? I think there was something like a 2-minute standing ovation before he said a word for Jimmy Kimmel on the program when he returned, when Disney said, "Come on back, all is forgiven."
Even Jon Stewart
emotional.
on his Daily Show, he said, "Oh, Jimmy Kimmel's back tonight," or something. It was just this kind of a immediate outburst of noise and sound that, as a kind of rival host of a comedy show with a bit of an ego, he was just forced to kind of sit there nodding his head quietly, waiting for the crescendo to die down. But yeah, that audience was definitely excited. I didn't see it in full, but I've seen the little bits segmented in the news. I was going to chop up bits of audio and the Trump stuff, and I thought, no, maybe I won't do that because, they'll be in the news bulletins. They'll probably talk about it on Wallace's panel and so on, which they did a little bit. But also, Trump at the UN was their main focus. But yeah, really, really interesting. Also in the light of the fact that we had Stephen Colbert effectively cancelled by his employer, CBS, for reasons that, vary depending on who you talk to. But ABC's suspension of Kimmel, clearly over those comments, the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterise this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them. That was the tone of it. And a suspension, so, it's not even unprecedented for a host to go out there and for a program to be taken off, a kind of cooling down period. But of course, in the heightened tensions and the backdrop in the Colbert example, people reacted strongly, as they should. And maybe it was bad publicity that prompted ABC Disney to pretty quickly signal that it was going to come back.
It's intriguing, isn't it? Because, there's a lot of talk about the fact that these companies are needing Trump's government to allow various mergers and acquisitions to go through, and if he's not happy with them, then he won't allow that to happen, so they'll lose a huge amount of money. That seems to be the whole premise behind this. But I suppose it was more surprising that the show did come back after just 6 nights.
Yeah, I think so. Particularly when you consider Trump's comments that he'd made both in response to reporters' questions and on his own Truth Social platform. So I think we're going to test ABC out on this. Let's see how we do. He made reference to last time I went after them, they gave me $16 million. This one sounds even more lucrative. What a bunch of losers. Let Kimmel rot in his bad ratings. Was Kimmel rose to that in his debut or his return program, saying, "Oh, not tonight do I have bad ratings." But watching it, it's so tit for tat. It's so and this is the day. Remember, this is the day that Donald Trump went to the United Nations, flip flopped on Ukraine, called climate change a con.
Said all the countries were going to hell.
That's right. In fact, 3 News was really interesting tonight. That Samantha is standing, at the intro part for the news and cycling through a few headline images that kind of bear down on her on the 3 News set, and they just went through there were 3 or 4 of them with the captions. So one was your countries are going to hell. Then they flipped to the next one, empty words. His summary of what the UN's good for. And then I've been right about everything. So I took a shot of that one to put this online on our podcast feed as well, because it's got Sam Hayes and her newsreading outfit kind of staring at this giant poster of Donald Trump like, "I've been right about everything." Very clearly he hasn't. And I thought they might even put one up, it's like they're eating the cats or whatever, some of those. It was like his greatest hits or something. They even had, Winston Peters at the UN, where he is making news by saying, "I wouldn't have said such undiplomatic things about the UN," which is just self-evident. And you think, well, why on earth is that a story? Just even that level of comment. It seems absurd in what Kimmel himself said, that when you consider what Trump and MAGA people say, that's so much more outrageous. Why is the sensitivity so great and the standard so high for people talking about him? But then again, of course, Phil Goff made comments about Trump being a bully, didn't he, at a Chatham House event, and immediately was no longer our High Commissioner
on his way home
to London,
yes.
at the behest of Mr. Peters. So I guess, that certainly is a story. But all of this, when you consider, the sorts of things he's talking about there, climate change, Ukraine policy, yesterday, the paracetamol thing, it's just... the to and fro between a president and comedians, the sensitivities just all seems quite absurd. But it's certainly headline making.
Yes, the writers couldn't have come up with it. It's amazing, isn't it? But the stance of the Federal Communications Commission, this guy, what is the chair, Brendan Carr, his mafiosa type stance towards these production companies and broadcasters. Yeah,
that is really, really interesting. Like you mentioned the commercial considerations, and that's certainly a part of it. And with CBS and other companies that have been embroiled in that Stephen Colbert decision, they wanted approval for mergers, and actually Philip Crump, who's now a member of the NZME editorial board, a kind of a blogger and former broadcaster, he wrote a Substack newsletter about that, which is quite interesting because he's taking the point that this is actually about technology as much as anything. They're building these companies, Larry Ellison, his son David, now running this outfit, Skydance, and now that it's effectively become the owner of a major network, all this stuff is enormous. And what Philip said was, Ellison's merging news, entertainment, AI as well. They're creating these technology businesses that go, and the editorial realignment that goes on within them is a part of that, and possibly best seen within these huge changes in business and tech. But the FCC, I guess the question with that is, so that's the American regulator, Federal Communications Commission. So Brendan Carr has certainly said, they have a license as a broadcaster, the network, granted by us at the FCC. That comes with an obligation to operate in the public interest, he said. Then he went on the Fox News channel, Sean Hannity, interview with him, and said, we are going to enforce this public interest obligation. If there's broadcasters out there that don't like it, they can turn their license in. But that's our job, and we're making some progress now. And what people are now looking at is, if they pursue this, can the FCC actually use statutory authority and override what most people consider to be sort of First Amendment protections for free speech? One lawyer pointed to, there was a decision just last year, the US Supreme Court said that a New York regulator could not discourage companies from doing business with the NRA, the Gun Rights National Rifle Association. Said to do so amounted to coercion and violated the First Amendment. And that's not about news or comedy or commentary or anything like that, but saying that the principle's the same if it's coercion and federal authority. They've also pointed out, though, that Carr has acted on his own here, saying there's a 5-member board, including one Democrat who very strongly speaks out about the actions of the board and specifically the statements of Brendan Carr. So there's that. And then there's this other question about if what he's being threatened here is with this public interest provision would be if he had distorted the news, because what Trump has objected to is saying that Kimmel was effectively lying about the influence of this guy who's accused of the murder of Charlie Kirk. But Kimmel is a late night comedian. The show is broadcast by an entertainment division, not a news division. So could you seriously advance a legal opinion that as an entertainer he was doing anything other than advancing an opinion, which certainly would be, you'd think, protected under that First Amendment in the US Constitution. So I'd be amazed if it actually did get to a legal situation. But then again, people launch these suits, there are settlements and other business interests in the background, as we've seen with these other cases.
So chilling comments across the board there. And so where do we go now, do you think?
Well, it depends whether Trump himself seems to want to prosecute this, because other people will take their lead from him. I was thinking back to, I was in the Philippines at an event last year and talked to some people from a network which has twice been taken off the air. Once under the rule of Ferdinand Marcos back in the 1980s, before his, he declared martial law after that. But before that, he was taking away the licenses of broadcasters who displeased him. And it happened to them again. Twice that network has been knocked off air by this stuff. So, these things are kind of real. And actually, Gavin Ellis, the former Herald editor who does a weekly comment of his own every Tuesday, this week pointed out he said John Adams and Abraham Lincoln as presidents had jailed journalists whose reporting they didn't like, which I was unaware of. And he's saying, look, whether Trump's methods for constraining this right to free speech, they may not be new. Whether, that could backfire on him, we'll see. But he pointed to the fact of the Wall Street Journal, which is, conservative publication Rupert Murdoch owned, saying the political cycle of using governments to punish opponents is taking the country into dark corners that will result in less freedom and less free speech for all sides. But, there will be people who are Trump followers or consider themselves at least of the right, and they will be or potentially could be offended, upset or alarmed by restrictions on free speech too.
But even the Pentagon's unveiled new restrictions.
The Department of War, as Trump wants to
rename it,
rebadge them. Yeah, so that is Pete Hegseth, Defence Secretary, on the platform X, where else, saying the press is no longer allowed to roam the halls of a secure facility, wear a badge and follow the rules or go home. So pretty much more formal authorization for and limiting of movements for journalists who report on the Pentagon and defence issues.
But what do the Pentagon rules really mean?
Hard to say. I'm sure you can't just knock on the door of the Pentagon, wave your press card and walk around unbidden and talk to people. But, since the 60s and the Vietnam War and so on, when, the military considered that the free access that journalists had to military figures and the freedom of movement even onto battlefields and so on assisted, by the US forces, that really backfired on them in terms of public opinion. So ever since then, there's been tightening up, embedding and so on, as we've seen in the two Gulf conflicts, big ethical questions about that. So it's certainly not that. But just interesting, I was just reading recently a book by the British journalist Max Hastings, who covered conflicts like the Falklands War and indeed Vietnam when he was a very young man before he became a newspaper editor in the UK. And he makes the point that, actually military need not panic about this because media coverage often doesn't spill over into hostility against the military, in the nations that they serve and the people they represent. It's the politicians that usually cop it in the end from, accurate and revealing media coverage of what goes on within the military. And also he says, soldiers doing the fighting or serving their countries, who have their lives on the line, they need to feel that their families and people back home know what they're doing. And some of them might resent the fact if wrongdoing or military conflicts they're involved in are being cast in a bad light back home. But in the end, he says, from talking to a lot of them in different conflicts, a common thing is that they want people to know what the background is to what they do. And there are cases of that here in the reporting of, say, Nikki Hager, John Stevenson, journalists like that reporting on deployment of New Zealand forces.
Now, I suppose we could change the topic and a positive one, I guess, for RNZ last week, some better news. Yeah,
better news because, as we know, the audience figures, although there was a small uptick in the last lot, there's been a lot of coverage of RNZ's audience slump, particularly RNZ National, and also the so-called Sutherland Report, fairly withering assessment of what RNZ has been doing and needs to do. But last week, survey results that RNZ carries out, the survey organisation Varian, public opinion research company, they did their annual survey for RNZ. So RNZ now trusted by 58% of people who responded. A year ago it was 49%. So RNZ said it's the best score they've had in this, and when you combine that with new figures also showing RNZ reaching, they say, 83% of New Zealanders aged 18 plus each month, that being up from 79% from the last survey. So that of course includes all the shared content that goes out on other platforms, digital content, online stuff, as well as the radio networks, RNZ National and Concert. Good news for RNZ.
Yeah, but the one thing about statistics is you can spin them in a positive light any way you like.
Well, you can, but this is the
same. Is it useful for RNZ? This is good?
Well, it is, in two ways. One, that it's the same survey firm, the same survey method, so you're comparing like with like, so anything that shows an uptick, that's good. But there are also other surveys. There's the Nielsen digital content ratings that that we spoke about before. There are other surveys of trust, one carried out by the AUT every year. That's in its, I think, 6th year this year. And so in all of those, if you can present those to the government and your stakeholders to show there are measures that show that trust is going up, that's good for RNZ. And of course, they've been under political pressure because they had Minister Paul Goldsmith saying, we want you to increase your reach. So, build your audiences. We want to see better trust results. And so being able to present this to government is certainly useful for RNZ and takes the sting out of those, the sort of longer term decline in live radio listening audiences that's been given them.
9% is not to be sneezed at. It's a good figure, isn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's for the digital growth. Yeah. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Now, the other state broadcaster, of course, TVNZ, had a review of its TV news, checking for bias, and the result there.
Yeah, if I'm right, this was came out under the radar, I think, in a publicly issued statement of performance expectations, the sort of thing they have to do as a state-owned broadcaster. They revealed that they would be doing this. It might have also been a response when RNZ had its Russia editing scandal. They did a similar check then, so maybe that's just for them a bit of corporate sort of safety. But anyhow, they hired the Australian Alan Sutherland, formerly of the ABC and SBS, another public broadcaster in Australia, and he's the guy that got hired to do RNZ's post-Russia editing scandal check and review as well. So he has identified, according to TVNZ, only minor technical or editorial issues worthy of further internal discussion, but no evidence of any systematic bias or lack of impartiality in the reporting of One News. But that's only according to a TVNZ summary of the report, because TVNZ did not release that in full, and when the Herald requested it for an article that appeared on Monday, they were not able to acquire the full document.
Why not?
Well,
I mean, should they?
Yeah, I think they should, but TVNZ said, look, it's to protect the privacy of people named in it. Secondly, to maintain effective conduct of public affairs through the free and frank expression of opinions. And thirdly, to allow TVNZ to carry out its commercial activities. So always where you can deploy that commercial motive as a reason for screening yourself. Companies often do that, but I think they should. You could redact names if you have to, and it would actually be good to know what these minor issues are, because what might be minor issues to some people may not be to others. So the Herald say they're going to go to the Ombudsman to get it, and I might write a letter as well.
Intriguing, actually. So you get a guy like Alan Sutherland to come in and do a review. How does he go about it? Do you know how you test news bulletins for bias?
Not exactly. This was a kind of 7-day spot check. So they took a random week, it sounds like, and monitored the news coverage over that week. So it's just a spot check, really. And this was assessed in against its own impartiality standards. So in TVNZ's own editorial policies, they say the employees were not told in advance what the timing would be. This area under review. It said a cross-section of news coverage was reviewed, and then content from other news organisations was also reviewed to compare the decision making to see if anything stood out. So that's how they did it.
Yeah. So is there any reason to think TVNZ wouldn't? I mean, why shouldn't it get a clean bill of health?
Well, some critics say that. They've often media-wide criticism that the media is biased, left-leaning or whatever. There was one issue, and the Herald made a point of it in its article on Monday, that the newly appointed political editor, Mikey Sherman, earlier this year, her first political poll attracted a lot of complaints because it really ramped up the sense of drama and threat and jeopardy for the government. But the BSA handled those complaints and pretty much cleared it, just said it was just a kind of slightly hyperbolic treatment. So a spot check like a 7-day one wouldn't pick up things like, for example, something that has been cited as, in some people's eyes, evidence of bias or a misaligned focus. School lunches, do you remember when there was so many, day after day after day? And TVNZ specifically got a lot of criticism for focusing on quite small incidents and putting them into the headlines. So you won't pick up things like that, I don't think, in a 7-day screenshot or spot check of what you're broadcasting. So that sort of selectivity, if we can put it like that, that often strikes people as being bias, although often it really isn't, but it's just the level of focus. Sort of thing that Winston Peters, David Seymour regularly accused the media of. I don't think that would come into that kind of realm for a survey like that.
Colin, we've got a minute to go. Do you want to go through, you had a few things that you watched on 3 that stood out to you? Yeah,
that's right. It's Tuesday nights. It's almost like the older, how we've heard so many people say current affairs, on the way out, it's not the same and local dramas really disappeared. Well, on 3, you've got Patrick Gower with his issues. Paddy Gower has issues. That's on at 7:30 every night after half an hour after the 3 News episode. A couple of good episodes. Good one on bowel cancer last night. The week before that, they did one on Wegovy, the weight loss drug. Really good. And then at 8 p.m, they've got the new Te Reo Rich drama Tangata Pai. So 2nd episode last night. And it's looking really good. It's really different. It's kind of risky. So I recommend people check it out. It's fascinating and not at all the sort of TV drama that we've had for sort of mass audiences on 3 in the past. So check it out.
We would expect. Yeah, fair enough. Colin, thanks so much. Midweek Mediawatch. Colin Peacock will catch you on Sunday morning.